Let's go. Plot armor. Top 10 secretly broken quirks in My Hero Academia. Let's check this out.
There are a lot.
And me, my favorite ones are always gonna be the villains. What his name? Shikar, whatever his name is.
Lot of quirks in My Hero
The one that
Academia.
touch and decapitate everything. Like, yeah, him. He like the best one to me.
Yeah. Some are overpowered and some are downright awful, but sometimes a seemingly worthless or simple quirk can actually turn out to be way cooler than you might think. This is our list of the top 10 underrated quirks in My Hero Academia.
Oh, underrated. Let's go.
Number 10, Sludge.
Oh, I forgot about
This
him.
first quirk is so underrated that it doesn't even have an official name, and neither does its user. The Sludge Villain from the first 2 episodes of the series may only be a D-rank villain, but his quirk is much more impressive. With it, the villain can survive in small quantities, as seen when All Might housed him in a soda bottle, despite his typical size being larger than most people. And with that, he clearly doesn't need air to breathe. Besides fitting through all small spaces, the Sludge Villain, although never successful, can actually take over the bodies of others completely. And this includes the use of their quirk too. The only issue is that it takes a long time to complete the hostile takeover. But considering he was able to get the drop on characters like Bakugo and Shinso, uninterrupted, he'd be able to successfully take control of most people, which is really scary. If he actually trained his quirk and could achieve this even faster, he could easily be one of the most dangerous villains around.
I forgot about him, bro.
Almost like a reverse Venom situation. Number 9, Tape.
Oh,
Zero's
yeah, I like Tape. Tape, he kind of cool too, man. I mean, I like his quirk, man. Got that little Spider-Man thing going on with him.
quirk Tape is a physical mutation that allows his oversized
And I like, and I like Old Buddy too, man. His.
act as tape dispensers. Thanks to this, he has access to something very similar to Spider-Man's web slinging.
Yeah,
And since the creator
Spider-Man.
of My Hero Academia, Horikoshi, is such a fan of Marvel Comics, it's clear that this is why he has pointed out Tape to be one of his favorite quirks in the entire series. I mean, he even made it again and gave it to Deku in the form of Black Whip. And we all know how awesome that quirk is. The tape Zero produces is strong enough to support his weight, hold large structures together, and immobilize or restrain targets. From there, they can be layered on top of each other for even greater support. And because it's tape, he doesn't need to be attached to it for any of this to work. Class 1A students have a tendency to inspire each other with previously unimagined applications of their abilities. Zero helped Deku train with Black Whip, and there is no reason to believe that those benefits would not be mutual. After all, when it comes to quirks, Deku is really great at evaluation. And if Zero were to get the Shinso treatment and be especially trained by Eraserhead, his combat potential would skyrocket. I mean, he pretty much has the quirk version of Eraserhead's binding cloth. Zero also isn't limited to only one type of tape. He also has double-sided tape, which is to say that he may have the potential for even more interesting variations. And one thing I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't realize about Zero is that he can release several strands of tape simultaneously. And based on the fact that he's never displayed any issues with accuracy, it would seem that he has some degree of control over these things before they stick to a surface. Number 8, Hardening. If you've been with the channel for a while,
Yeah, I like his too, man. Like a big, strong defense.
know that I am a big fan of Kirishima. Hardening is a transformation type that allows Kirishima to harden any and every part of his body. This grants him both incredible defensive and offensive capabilities. In the beginning, Kirishima actually hated his quirk, mostly because when it first developed, he accidentally cut himself. Yeah, that's why he has that scar. Quirks like Hardening aren't very special in the world of My Hero Academia. They're pretty common and simple. When he was younger, Kirishima was inspired by a pro hero with a similar quirk by the name of Crimson Riot, who believed that a manly spirit was more important than any quirk. Following this, Kirishima developed his ever hard-working, never back down approach to life, which was perfect for his quirk because unknown to him, hardening isn't as simple as it seems. It turns out that hardening is an adaptive quirk. Like a muscle, after recovering from stress, Kirishima's hardening becomes stronger than it was previously. In this way, Kirishima becomes more durable and stronger with each of his fights. From being bulletproof to now tanking hits from Prime All for One and piercing the hardened exterior of Gigantomachia. Kirishima is an absolute beast that certainly lives up to all the Hercules motifs. And frankly, his body is still growing. He is still just a teenager. and he'll be even stronger when he reaches his physical peak as an adult. One of this quirk's shortcomings is the fact that it is limited to close quarters combat, and although Kirishima can't launch projectiles, in theory, he could increase his attack range and potential pretty easily. All he has to do is grow out his hair. Seriously, Kirishima's hardening quirk extends to his hair too. If he had more of it and can swing it around, he would be able to expand his range. Not to mention the mix-up potential of flowing hair suddenly becoming a jagged hazard. It would even line up with his Hercules motifs, since it would look like a lion's mane on his head. Lastly, with an actual fighting style, Kirishima would be leagues ahead of his peers. Right now, he kinda just bulldozes his way through things and overwhelms his opponents through sheer strength alone. If he actually had technique behind this, he would be unstoppable. Number 7, Compress.
Hey man, Compress his. I'm so confused here, man. Like I still don't know what his is.
Mr. Compress's quirk Compress is an emitter type that allows him to shrink anything down into a small marble. Like some of the strongest quirks in the series, Compress only needs a single touch to result in instant victory. There is no limit to how many of these things he can have active at a time. No limit to how long he can have something encased. No way to deactivate it without his—
I mean, I feel like if that's the only thing he got, then I don't know, man.
And no weight limit. He's pretty much like a Pokemon trainer with infinite Master Balls. It can even be selective enough to sever individual limbs. And since these marbles can encase anything, Mr. Compress has the potential to be the most unpredictable villain ever. This quirk is perfect for smuggling and theft, something that may very well have been inherited from his ancestor, the peerless thief, Oji Harima. He's captured car-sized boulders, fire, groups of people. The possibilities are truly endless.
But it sounds impressive though, I ain't gonna hold you.
There is absolutely no reason to underestimate this quirk. It is really broken. Number 6, Zero Gravity.
Hold on.
Uraraka's quirk Zero Gravity is a contact-based emitter type that allows it to remove the effects of gravity on solids. Back during the sports festival, which was a very long time ago, Uraraka's weight limit was 6,000 pounds. So aside from maybe Gigantomachia at his biggest, that's enough to easily lift any character. And as we saw from Toga's use of the quirk, to any character without mid-air maneuverability, it is a death sentence. One touch is all that it would take for Uraraka to make most people completely vulnerable to subsequent attacks, or simply being dropped from a high altitude. Zero Gravity can also work as a pseudo super strength, allowing the user to move anything within their weight capacity. And by using the quirk on themselves, the user gains access to top-tier movement. The more stuff around her at any given time, the more complicated dealing with Uraraka will ultimately be. Number 5, Search. The former number 32 hero ragdoll of the Wild Wild Pussycats.
Hey, Search seemed kind of hard.
Formerly the wielder of Search, an emitter type quirk that was stolen by All For One and later shared with Shigaraki. And it is one of the more valuable quirks that the two possess. Search allows a person
that his name Shigaraki. I like that. He got like one of the most OD powerful quirks.
Know the location and weaknesses of up to 100 people at once. And this information is then permanently stored. It's thanks to this quirk that All For One was so easily able to evade Deku despite his constant pursuits after the First War. But what most people fail to realize is that Search does not have a trigger. Most quirks have some sort of body part that's needed for their quirk to work. Ida's engine quirk, for instance, doesn't work if he loses his legs. Overhaul can't use his quirk anymore because he lost his arms.
Yeah,
Search isn't like that. The user doesn't need to see a person directly, touch them, speak to them, nothing. This quirk sounds like an absolute menace to criminals since they'd never be able to actually escape. Their location would always be known. Number 4, Tail. Ojiro,
Man, he got a powerful tail, I ain't gonna hold you.
Quirk Tail is a mutant type that gives its user a large tail. It's about as simple gets. Because of this, Ojiro doesn't really get the respect I think he so rightfully deserves. The tail this quirk provides is extremely bulky and muscular, and thanks to it being several times larger than any other limb, it is extremely strong. So in a way, it also comes with super strength. That's pretty awesome. And not some low-level super strength either. This thing is strong enough to break out of and create a rapid vortex in a sea of hardening liquid metal. This tail is also incredibly durable, allowing it to act as a proper shield against most projectiles. That's pretty much a hardening quirk. And unlike an arm or leg, Ojiro's tail can shift and contort in all directions. Something I really need you guys to understand is that My Hero Academia is actually set in a distant alternate future. We're talking about hundreds of years here. The only reason technology hasn't advanced much is because of how quirks have impacted society. In their quirk-based world, things like martial arts and specialized fighting styles became very uncommon. Ojiro is one of the very few characters that actually knows how to fight without a quirk. And so in close quarters, he's a nightmare for most opponents. And that's all before you even include his tail. And Ojiro is still young. When he gets older, his body will be stronger across the board. And that includes his tail, which will then be at least twice as strong as it is right now. So please, put some respect on this man's name. Number 3. Mushroom. Konoko's quirk Mushroom is a long-range emitter type that allows it to create and spread mushroom-growing fungus spores from her body. And listen, I'll be the first to admit that this quirk isn't without its faults. All of Konoko's mushrooms die after about 2 to 3 hours. They spread best in high humidity, but anything that can actively prevent them from spreading, like fire or strong winds, will shut this quirk down. But aside from those sorts of situations, this quirk is absolutely terrifying. In the hands of a villain, this is a very scary ability. As we saw during the 1A versus 1B battles.
Yeah, I ain't gonna hold you, man. I was like, yo, I didn't like her quirk, bro. Like, it did seem like it was OP.
A target being anywhere near these mushrooms is pretty much a win condition for the user. Once a person inhales some of her spores, Konoko can cause mushrooms to grow inside the person's throat, making it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to breathe. And that's the tame version of this. These mushrooms can grow.
It gets you from the inside. The junk can end you from the inside out.
On and perhaps in any part of the body. A person's entire mouth could be covered in them, keeping them from speaking. Mushrooms could grow on their eyeballs, blinding them. Thankfully, she's not a villain, and she can do all this from a distance. Although she sterilized his allies to avoid affecting them too, based on the fact that she was able to more specifically target the inside of Tokoyami's body, Konoko clearly has the ability to be more precise with her quirk and simply covers entire battlefields as a way to deal with groups. There's also the fact that these mushrooms aren't all the same. The only thing stopping Konoko from using poisonous mushrooms instead is the fact that she aspires to be a hero. And listen, for the most part, mushrooms need to be consumed to cause real damage, but I'd like to think that letting several sit in a person's throat for extended periods of time can't be a good thing. And if she were to be more concentrated in the application of her spores, she might be able to completely cover a person's body in them. But on the other hand, this quirk could also serve as an endless supply of food. You might get tired of only eating mushrooms, but in the case of food shortages or famine, this could be a game changer. Number 2. Meatball. Seiji Shishikura's Meatball quirk is a transformation type that allows him to manipulate the flesh of himself and—
I ain't gonna hold you, bro. That dude here, can't stand here. I ain't gonna hold you.
And others. With it, Shishikura managed to take down several hero hopefuls during the provisional license exam.
Oh.
Quirk is a transformation type that allows him to manipulate the flesh of himself and others. With it, Shishikura managed to take down several hero hopefuls during the provisional license exam, including 2 of Class 1A's strongest members, Kirishima and Bakugo. With this quirk, Shishikura was able to sever his own limbs and control them telepathically. Offensively, this is a nightmare to deal with. Based on the fact that he didn't even recoil when his severed fingers were blasted by Bakugo's explosions, it doesn't look like pain is shared once a part of his body is severed. They can also become pretty huge. But even with their massive size, Shishikura managed to have one circle around his target by going under the bridge they were on and successfully grabbed Bakugo. This is the same guy that previously anticipated Uraraku's attack despite the perfect stealth conditions she set up during the sports festival. So Meatball can be big, stealthy, invulnerable, and finely controlled. What else? Well, because he can sever them pretty quickly, this could double as an incredible evasion tool, sorta like Buggy from One Piece. And at that, Shishikura stuck to using his arms, but based on the explanation of his quirk, there's no reason to believe he can't use other parts of his body too. For recon, maybe he could do something like remove his ear and send it off to listen in. But remember, this control over flesh isn't only limited to him. he can also manipulate the flesh of others. He turned others into immobile clumps of flesh with just a touch, completely removing them from the situation. But let's say that Shishikura wasn't planning on becoming a hero and didn't set such high standards for himself. What's stopping him from splitting people apart like he does with his own body? This guy's weakness was the fact that he could only sustain a certain amount of damage before the person he's modified returns back to normal. But that is the last thing you'd want if he has already split a person in two. And at that, we know that generally, when it comes to quirk limitations like this, the scale of a person's use is a big deal. And here, Shishikura was already using Meatball on about 18 people, and that's not including himself. Frankly, this guy has some of the best quirk control we have ever seen, and to combat this so-called weakness, he could cover himself in his control flesh to create a sort of impenetrable armor for himself. Thus far, we focused on combat potential with this one, but what about support? Well, I'd argue that Meatball could easily be used to close up wounds or repair damaged limbs, and he could even modify the bodies of others to better prepare them for certain circumstances. Many quirks depend on a quirk factor to operate, something that Meatball could remove or even enhance. Imagine Ida with even stronger legs. This quirk is very similar to the body modification powers Shigaraki managed to gain towards the end of the series, which should say everything about how capable this quirk truly is. And the fact that Shishikura is such a strong believer in the quirk singularity doomsday theory, and his creator made Shigaraki like this, is very interesting to me. Number 1. Frog. Tsuyuasui's frog quirk is a mutant type that provides several different abilities related to those found in frogs. And to me, it is a fantastic representation of just how complicated quirks have become in modern times. Both of Sue's parents have frog-like appearances, so we're dealing with the combination of two frog quirk-related bloodlines. Bloodlines that, considering the heteromorphic prejudices of their society, likely span several generations respectively, of which Sue is the pinnacle. Understand that quirks relating to animal traits in My Hero Academia are especially impressive, because as opposed to being a single power, they pretty much provide entire power sets. Evolutionarily speaking, most animals owe their survival to several notable traits as opposed to just one. As humans, we have both our higher intelligence threshold and opposable thumbs among many other traits. Not only does the pro hero Hound Dog's quirk grant him exceptional hearing and smell, but he also has powerful jaws and claws. And who can forget the battle junkie of a number 5 hero, Miruko, and her quirk Rabbit? That one provides her enhanced hearing, smell, leg strength, excitability, and intuition, all of which made her an absolute legend of a hero. Sue, meanwhile, is more than 10 years younger than her, with a quirk that is arguably much more impressive. Before creating My Hero Academia, Horikoshi's most successful series was Omagadoki Zoo, a story that followed several superpowered zoo animals: Uabami, Hawks, Shishido, Selkie, Gang Orca, Officer Gori, Wash, Shoto, and plenty
I like Wash.
more, all owe their existence to this animal story in some way. But Sue is the only character in Class 1A with prominent animal traits and abilities, so you already know that Horikoshi gave her plenty to work with. And considering the fact that he is such a huge Naruto fan, it is no wonder he picked a frog to be the focus here. First off, Sue has a 65-foot-long tongue that can lift average-sized humans for long periods of time with absolutely no strain or struggle. With this alone, we are looking at a flexible, long-range, super strong, and omnidirectional appendage that can lift, bind, strike, and improve mobility. Next, Sue can stick to various surfaces in ways virtually indistinguishable from Spinner's quirk Gecko. After that, she is naturally the greatest swimmer we have seen in the series thus far. Even the sea rescue hero Selkie depends on his gear to reach comparable levels. She can hop faster and further than most can ever run. Her leg strength is considerable, and managed to launch an adult villain with a shark quirk into the watery depths only a few days into her heroic studies. Later, she was able to absolutely decimate the scaly defenses of fellow UA student Rin from Class 1B. Her stamina is ridiculously broken too. Even after having it drained by Katsukame's energy suck quirk, she was still able to fight against him for 20 minutes straight. And he not only drained her stamina, but the stamina of several police officers, Mr. Brave, Ryukyu, Uraraka, and Nejire, all while being supercharged thanks to Trigger. She can inflate her stomach to store swallowed objects and regurgitate them at any time. She can expel the toxic inner lining of her stomach. She can produce a paralyzing mucus from her arms that doubly serves to counter and disturb a person's sense of smell, which is highly effective against other animal-based quirks as they tend to rely on smell. Not to mention, she can change the color of her body to blend into her surroundings thanks to camouflage, effectively giving her a pseudo-invisibility quirk. You can't see her, you can't smell her, she can hit you from a distance, she can cling to pretty much anything in the environment, is highly evasive, and is completely in her element underwater. This quirk is incredible. Based on the data books, even before the first war arc, Sue's power stat went from an E to a C, her speed stat went from a C to a B+, her technique stat went from a B to an A, and her cooperativeness went from an A to an S. That last one is thanks to how incredibly well her quirk works with others like Uraraka's, as in that case, it makes up for the shortcomings of zero gravity completely. And Sue's abilities aren't limited to a single species of frog either, of which there are known to be over 6,000. And for those of you who may not know, there actually isn't a scientific distinction between frogs and toads. Toads are just a classification of frogs. In fact, on account of the visible warts and dry skin, Sue's dad is more toadish. And remember that like many others on this list, Sue is still pretty young. Based on how quirk regulation goes, and what we know to be a very normal upbringing and school situation for her before enrolling at UA, Sue has only been training her quirk for less than a year. Most students train and refine abilities they have always had. Sue does more than that. She has steadily unlocked more and more frog abilities as time has gone on. By the time she is a fully grown adult, Sue will be in league with some of the most impressive multi-quirk powerhouses in the series. Here are some examples of frog abilities that could easily be made into incredible powers. The waxy monkey tree frog can secrete a non-addictive substance 40 times more potent than the drug morphine. The Matzes tribe in Peru use it before hunting to, quote, feel like gods, and a synthetic version has been used as a performance-enhancing drug for racehorses. Sounds like a clean version of Trigger to me. Common toads can sense seismic activity hours in advance, and in the case of big earthquakes, several days in advance. And scientists still have no idea how they do it. Sounds a bit like Deku's danger sense, doesn't it? The Australian red-eyed tree frog secretes compounds from its skin capable of eliminating traces of HIV from infected cells. And they are far from the only ones with antibacterial slime. Healing abilities are really rare in My Hero Academia, so this would be insane. Australian green tree frogs can produce about 1% of their body weight in water by simply exposing themselves to cold night air before returning to their warm trees. In the case of Sue, this would be like having Kota's water gun quirk. Not only is this frog quirk incredibly capable, but its potential is easily one of the greatest we have ever seen. So yeah, frog is definitely the most underrated quirk in My Hero Academia. Check out our video on the top 10 strongest multi-quirk gods to see more epic abilities.
I probably gotta check that one out.